So I want you to imagine a scenario. It's a pretty simple question on the surface, but if you're really honest with yourself about it, it can be quite daunting. Like if you stopped showing up to your work today and you just disappeared for 90 straight days,
Hmm.
what would actually happen?
Oh, man. I mean, it is the ultimate stress test, right? For most people, and especially for most business owners. The answer is just a terrifying level of silence. And then, well, that's followed very quickly by total collapse.
Right. Which is exactly why we're asking it. That question, that 90-day test, is the entire foundation of our deep dive today.
Yeah, it sets the stage perfectly.
It really does. We are exploring this incredible treasure trove of insights from John F. Hendershot's blog over at Black Lake Advisory. And they specialize in businesses valued between $1 million and $10 million. So we're
Yeah.
talking about the real Main Street, the lower middle market engines of the economy.
And that specific valuation range, that 1 to 10 million mark, that is where the most revealing business dynamics happen.
How so?
Well, because you're past the initial startup phase, right?
Yeah.
You've proven the concept. But you usually don't have this massive insulated corporate infrastructure like a Fortune 500 company does. So it's basically the perfect laboratory to see what actually creates lasting value.
Yeah, that makes sense. And our mission today is to decode those hidden mechanics. Like whether you are an entrepreneur trying to scale, or maybe you're a manager running a department, or just someone looking to understand how real wealth and generational legacy are actually built, we're going to learn why raw hustle is, frankly, completely overrated,
Oh, absolutely overrated.
and why structured systems are absolutely everything.
Right. We are really trying to strip away those romanticized, cinematic myths of entrepreneurship that society loves to feed us, like the solitary genius working past midnight.
Right, exactly.
Instead, we're looking at the cold, hard math of what Black Lake Advisory calls business readiness.
So to understand how to build real value, we first have to understand why so many really smart, capable people accidentally build a trap for themselves instead.
Yes, they build a golden cage.
Exactly. The sources lay out this really stark difference between a job and a business, and they use that 90-day test we just mentioned. So in a true business, if the owner leaves for a quarter of the year, operations continue, revenue persists, the team executes.
The machine keeps humming.
Right. But in a job, everything just stops. That operational gap, that's the entire difference between a business worth buying and a temporary income stream that has an expiration date.
And the trap usually begins with this structural flaw that the sources call the founder bottleneck.
The founder bottleneck.
Yeah. And what makes this bottleneck so dangerous is that it's almost never visible from the inside. Like founders experience this bottleneck simply as busyness.
Right. They just think they're having a productive Tuesday.
Exactly. They feel needed, they feel essential to the mission, and they equate that constant frantic activity with forward momentum.
Okay, let's unpack this bottleneck a bit. Because I was thinking
Yeah.
about it like, think of a founder or even like a key project manager
Mhm.
as the battery in a smartphone.
Okay, I like that.
You absolutely need that battery to power up the device initially, right? It provides that crucial spark to get the hardware running. But if that phone can't eventually plug into a larger power grid,
Yeah.
it is going to die.
Huh.
The battery alone isn't a sustainable long-term infrastructure.
No, it's inherently temporary.
Right. But I do want to push back on the timeline here just a little bit.
Yeah.
Because don't founders kind of have EVE to be the bottleneck at the beginning?
Well, sure.
Like if you are starting a plumbing supply company or a tech firm and you don't micromanage quality control in those early days, I mean, the product probably fails before it ever reaches the market.
Yeah, what's fascinating here is how that initial necessary hustle morphs into a permanent dysfunction. You are absolutely right that early micromanagement is required. You have to get the engine turning. You have to define the standard of quality yourself.
Right. You're setting the bar.
Exactly. But the problem arises when owners confuse that intense personal activity with enterprise transferability. Like, just because you're working 80-hour weeks making sure every single detail is perfect, that doesn't mean you've built an asset that can be transferred to someone else.
And the psychology of it honestly makes total sense. If you are used to being the ultimate decision maker, stepping back probably feels like a massive loss of control.
It's terrifying for them, yeah.
But the sources highlight that if your team relies on your personal memory or your gut instinct or your direct oversight for every daily decision, you aren't actually leading an enterprise. You've basically just engineered a scenario where you are the highest paid, most stressed out cog in a broken machine.
And that dynamic places a hard ceiling on the company's potential. Because every decision that requires the founder's approval is a decision that moves at the speed of one human being.
Which is pretty slow in the grand scheme of things.
Really slow. And it explains why the advisory notes that burnout isn't usually a workload issue. It is an operational design issue.
Oh, wow. That's a huge distinction.
Right. Burnout happens because of poor delegation, reactive leadership, and a structural dependency on a single point of failure, which is usually the founder.
So because holding on to that control eventually becomes the disease, we really have to look at the cure. And the cure is how an organization captures its own knowledge. The sources point to this massive reality check, which is that hustle alone does not create enterprise value. Systems do.
And making that shift requires changing how we view documentation entirely.
Right. Because when most people hear the word documentation or standard operating procedures, they roll their eyes.
Oh, absolutely. They glaze over.
They think of it as this mundane compliance exercise, right? Something HR makes you do, or a giant binder that just sits on a shelf in the break room gathering dust.
Yeah, but let's make that concrete for the listener, because the Black Lake Advisory philosophy flips the script entirely. They frame documentation not as compliance, but as valuation exercise.
Okay, so what does a valuation-ready process actually look like compared to that dusty HR binder?
Right, so a valuation-ready process is a living, breathing mechanism. Let's say, I'll say you run a local logistics firm. A dusty compliance binder might just have a generic checklist for hiring drivers.
Like check their license, run a background check, that kind of stuff.
Exactly. Very basic. But a valuation-ready process documents the exact algorithm of how your dispatchers route trucks during a snowstorm.
Oh, wow. That's specific.
Very specific. It includes the software inputs they use, the criteria for prioritizing which clients get deliveries first, and the exact communication templates used to update vendors. It captures the how and the why so perfectly that a brand new manager could execute it with the exact same success rate as a 10-year veteran.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
Because every process that lives only in a key employee's memory is just a massive operational risk.
It's a huge liability.
Yeah. When a buyer looks at a company where the secret sauce is entirely trapped in the founder's head, they price that risk as a massive financial discount at the exit table. Like if the founder leaves, the value just leaves right out the door with them.
And this emphasis on systems clarifies a really crucial difference between scaling and growing, which the sources note are terms owners constantly mistakenly use interchangeably.
They are definitely used interchangeably.
Yeah, but they aren't the same. Growth might just be a sudden spike in revenue. Like you land a massive new client, your top-line revenue goes up, but your team has to work weekends and pull all-nighters just to fulfill the order.
So your revenue grew, but your actual capacity didn't.
Exactly. Which is the complete opposite of scaling. Scaling requires an operational structure that can handle increased demand without exponentially increasing the effort or relying on the sheer stamina of one person.
Right.
If your demand is high, but your business feels like it's constantly falling apart, it's usually because you are growing without actually scaling.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting to me. Because heavy documentation, rigid systems, standard operating procedures, it all sounds incredibly antithetical to the typical visionary entrepreneur.
Oh, they hate it.
Yeah, the person who starts a company usually thrives on agility and creativity and, frankly, running around putting out fires. So doesn't this level of corporate structure kind of kill a small business's agility?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, you really have to look at the ultimate goal of the enterprise. Like, are you trying to build a temporary lifestyle, or are you trying to build a permanent asset?
That's the real question.
Right, and this goes straight to the tension between profitability and transferability. Profitability is the present. It's cash in your pocket today, which agility and those quick gut-level pivots might help you achieve.
Sure.
But transferability is the future. It is the mathematical ability to hand this economic machine over to someone else and have it keep functioning without you.
Because sophisticated buyers, they aren't paying for your past agility. Like, the money you made last year is already gone. They are buying predictability.
Predictability is the ultimate currency in mergers and acquisitions.
They want absolute assurance that if they take over tomorrow, the engine will keep running exactly as it did yesterday. And you simply cannot transfer a founder's gut feeling.
No, you really can't.
So because documentation creates that predictability, it changes the entire dynamic of an eventual exit. Which brings us to probably the most shocking statistics in the source material. When it's time to actually pass the torch, the failure rate is just mind-blowing. up to 80%, and in some of the advisory-specific data sets, up to 92% of businesses listed for sale never successfully close.
It's staggering. And, the majority of those failures aren't due to bad macroeconomic conditions or like slight disagreements over the multiple.
Right, it's not the interest rates?
No. They fail because the business was structurally unprepared to be sold. The owner essentially is the business, and you cannot sell the owner.
You'd think it takes a buyer months of deep dive accounting to figure that out, right? But the insights from John Hendershot's desk reveal that sophisticated buyers have a 15 to 30-minute test.
Yeah, the 15-minute test.
They know in the first half hour if a business is a disorganized mess just by asking a few highly targeted questions. So let's actually walk through what those questions look like, because they are incredibly revealing.
So the first thing a buyer will ask in that 15-minute window is usually about customer concentration. They want to know if one or two major clients make up 30 or 40% of your revenue.
If they do.
If the answer is yes, that isn't really a business. That is a highly vulnerable subcontractor. If that one major client leaves, the entire company collapses.
Oof, yeah. And the second question usually revolves around the sales process. Like, a buyer will ask, who brings in the biggest accounts? And if the founder proudly puffs up their chest and says, oh, I do, I have all the relationship.
Giant red flag.
Right. The buyer immediately sees it as a liability because the revenue is tied to the founder's personal Rolodex, not a repeatable marketing system.
Exactly. And then they look at the financials. But they aren't just looking at the bottom line. They're specifically seeking something called quality of earnings.
Quality of earnings. Explain that a bit, because I think owners often misunderstand this.
Right. Owners think a profit and loss statement tells the whole story of what the business makes. But buyers look at a P&L to find hidden risks and dependencies. So calculating quality of earnings means a buyer will strip away all the owner's personal perks.
Like the company car, the country club membership.
Right. And they'll normalize the payroll because often founders underpay themselves just to make the profits look higher on paper.
Ah, sneaky.
Yeah. And then they look for consistent recurring cash flow. If the earnings are highly volatile or dependent on one-off projects, the quality is low.
So if your business fails that 15-minute test, the conversation is effectively over.
Yeah.
And the reason this matters to you, the listener, even if you have no plans to buy or sell a company anytime soon, is because of this looming economic event that the sources call the silver tsunami.
Yes, the silver tsunami. We are currently facing a massive demographic wave of aging baby boomer business owners who are rapidly approaching retirement age.
Millions of them.
Millions of local and regional businesses are going to enter this transition window simultaneously over the next decade. And as that 92% failure rate shows, a terrifying number of them are completely unprepared to be transferred.
And a failed transition doesn't just mean a wealthy owner misses out on a big payout. That's what people miss. The collateral damage is devastating. If a local manufacturing plant or a regional logistics firm closes its doors because it couldn't be sold, that destroys community jobs.
It wipes out suppliers who relied on that company.
It ripples through the entire regional economy.
It really elevates the conversation from personal wealth to community stability. The text introduces this concept of a legacy business, clarifying that longevity alone does not equal legacy.
I love that distinction.
Right. A company that survives for 40 years only to shutter the day the founder retires, that is not a legacy. A true legacy creates a self-sustaining economic engine that provides value long after the founder's direct involvement ends.
Right. So since building a legacy business from scratch is statistically incredibly risky, fraught with burnout, and super hard to scale, what's the alternative? The sources present this really compelling, mathematically sound alternative: acquiring an existing operating business.
Yeah, buying an existing business solves almost all the fundamental problems that starting from zero creates. I mean, with a startup, you are guessing what the market wants. You're trying to find product market fit.
It's all hypothetical.
Exactly. But with an acquisition, you already have historical cash flow, you have a validated product, and you have an existing customer base.
Let's use a mechanical analogy to move this away from the abstract. Starting a business from scratch is like trying to build a car out of individual parts while you simultaneously need to commute to work every day. You are literally walking every single day until it's perfectly assembled.
Yeah, it's exhausting.
But buying an existing business is like buying a used car. You immediately have transportation. It generates momentum on day one. And if the previous owner kept good maintenance logs, which goes back to our documentation, You can accurately predict how long it will run and exactly what needs fixing.
That's a great way to look at it. And the primary vehicle making this possible for everyday people in the U.S. is the SBA 7A loan program.
Let's talk about that, because this isn't just a tool for Wall Street.
No, not at all. It's not reserved for private equity firms. It is specifically designed to let an individual leverage capital to buy a Main Street business.
And the sources mention this involves a highly learnable 10-step process. So let's briefly break down the mechanics of how a regular person actually executes this. The process starts with self-qualification and education, like figuring out what kind of industry actually fits your skills.
Right, you don't buy a software company if you only know landscaping.
Exactly. Then you move into deal sourcing, actively looking for these retiring owners in the silver tsunami.
And once you find a target, you enter the initial screening phase. You sign non-disclosure agreements to evaluate their financials, basically looking for that quality of earnings we just discussed. And if it passes the test, you submit a letter of intent, or LOI, which outlines your offer.
And here is where the SBA 7A loan becomes magic. If the business is fundamentally sound, the government backs a significant portion of the loan. This means a buyer might only need to put down, say, 10% of the purchase price to acquire a multi-million-dollar asset.
It's incredible leverage.
You secure a lender, move into formal, deep due diligence, finalize the underwriting, close the deal, and then execute a 90-day transition plan alongside the seller.
This entirely reframes how wealth is generated, and it connects to probably the most profound philosophical concept in the source material, which is the ownership ladder.
The ownership ladder, yeah, this part hit hard.
The author argues that poverty, or even just feeling completely stuck in the middle class, isn't simply a lack of money. It is a lack of ownership. It's spending your entire adult life operating inside systems that you will never control, systems that you can never benefit from beyond a basic paycheck, and systems that you can never pass down to your children.
So what does this all mean for us? Think about the narrative our culture constantly pushes. We constantly glorify the garage startup. We make movies about the eccentric visionary who disrupts a massive tech industry. But we completely ignore the profound, quiet power of buying and optimizing a boring essential business.
So true.
Like taking over a local HVAC company, systemizing its operations, and providing a stable, structured environment for 30 employees that doesn't get you a massive tech blog headline. But it completely changes your family's financial trajectory.
And it raises an important question about how we fundamentally evaluate success. If the goal is lasting wealth and reduced risk, we have to emulate how sophisticated operators play the game. Intelligent business acquisition is almost never emotional. It isn't about the prestige of the industry. The smartest buyers are looking for structural soundness. They do not care if the product is glamorous. They care if the system is predictable.
The ultimate goal, whether you're an entry-level employee just figuring out your career path or a mid-level manager feeling totally capped out, is to move from participating in someone else's system to owning and refining your own. You climb the ownership ladder by understanding risk and prioritizing structure.
You basically stop trying to invent the wheel from scratch, and you start optimizing the wheels that are already rolling. It is a complete shift from an exhausting hustle culture to a sustainable structure culture.
I love that. From hustle culture to structure culture. Well, over the course of this deep dive into the Black Lake Advisory Framework, we've really covered incredible ground. We started with the harsh reality of that 90-day test, learning that if your operation stops when you stop, you don't own a business, you just own a demanding job.
A golden cage.
Right. We explored how valuation-ready documentation and systems will beat raw hustle every single time, because buyers are ultimately purchasing predictability. And we walked through the mechanics of the 15-minute test and the SBA loan process to show how anyone can actually step onto the ownership ladder and avoid being a casualty of the silver tsunami.
The through line here is just undeniable. Real value is created by building something durable, something that functions entirely independent of your personal energy and memory.
Which brings us to a final thought I really want you to sit with today. We've talked extensively about applying the ownership ladder and systems thinking to businesses, but I want you to apply that exact same framework to your personal life and your household right now.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, look at your personal finances, your daily routines, or even how you manage your community involvement. Are you constantly reacting to emergencies, renting your lifestyle, and operating inside digital and financial systems that profit off your attention? Or are you documenting your own personal operating systems, buying back your time, and building household assets that actually serve you?
Because if your personal life relies purely on your daily hustle just to stay afloat, you might be failing your own 15-minute test.
It's a heavy realization, but an empowering one once you see the mechanics behind it. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Whether you are prepping for a corporate exit, looking to acquire a Main Street business, or just trying to systemize your own daily routine, it is time to stop hustling and start structuring. Until next time, keep asking the hard questions.